give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. Shout out to my man Calvin for joining me. Glad to see you. Shout out to my man Jeffrey for joining me. Give me one in the chat if you can hear me. PBO got Candy in the background. He got to get on that dive, and he's just struggling out here. Happy Friday. Give me one if you can hear me. You see it, Memorandum of Understanding and ISA Information Security Agreement. Get my big face out of here. That's what we're going to touch on. Really, that's documentation between two different agencies, companies, or if your company's big enough, departments. I was working on a project for the IRS, and it was companies working with other companies, and I was telling the PM, if something happens, they're going to be looking for someone to blame. So these two particular documents spells out what are we going to change between departments, companies, or divisions. And we're going to dig into there. What's your file layout? What type of security are we going to use? What type of DR can we use between them? Because if we're working together to bring up an application or solution, if someone fails and we need to fail over to another region, we all need to do it, right? Or be able to communicate in different regions, but we need to have an understanding of what that's going to be. Until we're going to see, I got a couple of high-level diagrams. If the front is down or the end is down, are we down? Right? If we need to insert into the database for our piece and the database is down, are we down? How do they communicate that to us? And two, what is the agreement of that? Or if the database up, do we need to put them in the queue or stack them somewhere so when the database come back up, we can insert them in then, right? But once again, those need to be spelled out in those two documents right there, especially in federal space and big companies. You want to make sure there's no disagreement so you don't get blamed for something, right? So my job as a GRC or senior person is to make sure we don't get blamed, right? So, and everybody's trying to blame some. Everybody knows that's NIST 800-53, the top 20 controls that we're rolling up to. I didn't even think to figure out which controls the MOU and the ISA would be in. Everybody know I'm a NIST guy. Once again, if you have any questions, cybersecurity information, tech, just drop them in the chat. We'll get to them. NIST Memorandum of Understanding refers to a formal, non-binding agreement that establishes a framework for collaboration, coordination, or data share between NIST Institute of Standards and Technologies and another entity, such as federal agencies, state and local, government, university, or private organizations. So, a lot of times when I come on site or people ask me, these are two of the documents I kind of bring up. Who are we communicating with? What's our SLA, our system level agreement? How quick do we have to come up? How quick do we have to process? what level of security or aka encryption are we high, medium, low? Are we doing HIPAA and high trust, right? So these documents spells that out, so there's no miscommunication between teams, divisions, government, universities, private orgs. I do a lot of state and local work, so once again, to make sure those community, everybody understands what we're doing and what we agree to do. So like this project, you see there's 3 layers. You got the public subnets, the private subnets, and a private subnet. I worked on a big project. Each one of those domains were handled by a different company. So somebody did the front end, somebody did the middle, and somebody did the end, right? So we're going to have a MOU between each one of those divisions with how are we going to move the data, what's the security of the data, what's the classification of the data, and what's the DR of the data, right? And the next slide kind of spins that out too. Each one of these services were done by a different company, and we were kind of in the middle. So when somebody sends us data, once again, for those layers, is it XML? Is it a flat file? Is it comma delimited? How many times we're going to get it, right? How do we validate that we got all the data? All right. Sometimes you'll send a file, then you send another file, metadata file, saying it was 1 million records. If it's a dollar amount in there, if you added all the dollar amounts, they came up to $1.2 billion and a cent, right? So how would you validate that you got all the records, right? But once again, that's spelled out in your MOU and your internet exchange agreement, right? So once again, that's really I call it a legal document. I wouldn't call it quite legal, but that's the agreement that everybody understands how the data is going to be moved and what's the agreement is. So we're going to start looking at what things are in the document. The MOU defines the scope and intent of cooperation. For example, joint research, standard development, sharing cybersecurity compliance data, testing, certification, and validation. Is it NIST, NVI? Is it CMC? What cryptographical programs are we using? Are we doing NIST 800-53, which is my favorite? I think it's the best on the planet. But are we doing NIST CSF, the little brother? No, joking. AI, RMF, risk management framework is real hot with the AI with it. Then privacy frameworks. NIST has a part. Most people use GDPR or CCPA. New York DFS is hot. So what frameworks and privacy frameworks are you using? And those will help us bring out the requirements for these documents. Because if we're doing NIST, we know what that is. If we're doing NIST CSF, if we're doing a high trust for HIPAA, right? What framework is this project adhering to? You'd be amazed. Most people get confused when you start bringing stuff up like that. Let's keep rolling. So the ISA, so once again, the Memorandum of Agreement, the sections to it, we have parties, purpose and scope, responsibilities, governance, data handling, duration and termination, legal and non-binding clauses, names and roles, high-level goals of cooperation, duties of each organization. Remember when I showed that design is multiple organizations, so are you responsible for putting it in the database? Are you responsible for the front end, be it CSF? There's so many front ends out there. So what part, and once again, what duties of the organization for your design? Governance. A lot of times we have steering committees. We have review meetings, coordination meetings. The data handling requirement, once again, is it FISMA? Is it NIST 800-171, CMC, 853? So there's a lot. Duration and termination, effective dates, renewal terms, and termination clauses. Legal and non-binding, specify it's a non-legal binding contract, but set expectations. So, right, it's not done up by lawyers, right? So, but once again, it's done up by tech people, and this is the agreement we're going to use for when we move data or share data or or do computations? What does it all look like? Once again, put any questions or statements in the chat. We'll definitely get to them. The MOU under NIST guidance is a formal agreement between organizations that defines, and we looked at that previously, purpose, scope, and governance of relationship. It's not legally binding like a contract, but expresses a mutual intent to cooperate, often in the areas such as, we just looked at that again, joint research testing, data sharing, use of shared infrastructure, APIs, or cloud systems. So what cloud are you in? Is everybody in the same tenant? I've seen people where you do AWS for one, you do an API call to Azure, then the back end will be in Google, right? But once again, that data sharing agreement and interoperability projects, we got to agree upon what that communication is and how we're going to do it, once again, as a team. Federal Interagency, shout out to my man, Casual Economist, for joining us. Federal Interagency Initiatives under FISMA, FedRAMP, or CSF. MOU serves as an umbrella document governing collaboration, while specific technical security details delegated into the Interconnect Security Agreement, the ISA, or the System Security Plan. Most companies, unless you mature, I'm not going to have an SSP. That's a big document. It's super detailed. Really can be well over 500 pages. So most companies are going to have a interconnection security agreement, or a document that has that data and interpretation in it. We're going to look at what's in the ISA. MOU defines the overall relationship between intent, responsibility between organizations, cover administration, operational and management aspects, non-binding. At the policy level, the ISA defines the technical and security requirements for connecting systems, encryption, authentication, handling. It's a binding technical level document. So that's kind of how those two documents works together. To be honest, most times when I go in, most companies aren't at that level mature. So I actually push those together in one document in real life. So once again, I have the MOU at the top. Then the appendix, I talk about, like we talk about, what technology we're going to use, what API calls we're going to use, how we're going to DR, how we're going to classify data. And the other part of that is, if are we down as a whole unit, or if the back is down, once again, I need to queue it up. So when the back end comes up, the database, whatever, object oriented, whatever we got. So then once it comes up, I have the data queued up. Then I can go ahead and insert it in there, or pass it to it, and they can handle the insertion of the data. But once again, what's the DR part, and how do we figure out if we're down and can't get the application to work? What does that look like? Everybody know I'm a NIST guy, so there's the NIST controls on the left. So CA3, System Interconnects. We're talking about the MOUs and the ISA to manage and security connections. CA7, continuous monitoring, ensures ongoing assessments of the interconnections. So if we're connecting to different services teams or the cloud, how do we make sure they're up? And if they're down, how do we notify people what's down? Right? Are we doing the cloud watch, and the doing cloud watch? So we're monitoring, figuring out what's up or down, and once again, how do we communicate that out? And if we're violating SLAs for uptime, how do we figure that out to make sure, once again, we're not doing that? All right. PL2 is planning, system communication and protection policy, demonstrate policy enforcements for external systems. R3, risk assessment, define risk analysis for the connected systems. So when we start, we're going to figure out what's the classification of data. If it goes down, what does that mean for our project? Once again, then SA, non-external information systems governing shared or outsourced services via an MOU or ISA. So those are the controls we're hitting with the documents, MOU and ISA. And two, we talked about maturity and documentation. So those are two documents. Depending on what you're doing, if you're doing NIST, CMMC, boundaries, your boundaries for SSP, right? All those boundaries should be documented with some kind of MOU or ISA. If we're connected to another company and we're sending data or getting data, we need to have some kind of understanding. A lot of times when you deal with AWS, they give you a document and you sign it because for their understanding, right? So, and two, if you have custom applications and you send them out to like a hospital or you get them from a hospital, what's the file layout? Once again, when is it up? When is it down? What's the file format? So all those will be in your MOUs or ISAs. So that's kind of why those are important. This the government, which kind of, I wouldn't say sad, but somebody's trying to blame somebody, so nobody wants to look bad. So these documents make sure there's an understanding. So if something breaks or something doesn't work, it's in these documents. You can say, well, you didn't put it in there right, or this is the file format we agreed to. You sent me a file, but it didn't adhere to this format, so it was your fault and not mine. Not like we're trying to blame people. Shout out to us. Shout out to us. Typical MOU plus the ISA package structure. There's a NIST 847. I got a few pages out of it. I might do a whole stream about that, but that is the interconnect security agreement special publication. And I took some screenshots from the content table, and we'll get to that. MOU, once again, high level administrative agreement. ISA, interconnection security agreement. Technical connection parameters. System security plan, control implementation details, risk assessment and POAMs, identification of interconnection risk, authorization letter, ATO, or written management approval. Right, we've been talking about these different documents, and those are the documents you put together to get your ATO, which is authority to operate. So when you get an external assessment, they ask for all your documentation. These are a lot of the documentation you're going to get to your external audit. Shout out to Cyber Stoic. He would be reviewing those as an outside vendor. So we need to get him in here and let him comment on some of the documentation and how he would see them and how he would review them. But a lot of times when you think of GRC and external assessments, you have to give them a lot of paperwork. And these are the documents they want to see. Shout out to Regine. And shout out to my man Calvin for giving her a shout out. So once again, those are the documents that usually come about. I've done parts of these or quite a few of these. Usually I give the information over to the compliance director or the project manager. A lot of times they put the documents together. My job is to work with the other teams. If there's a disagreement, or make sure when I get this to the PM, a lot of times they're comfortable with the MOU and the ISA. Because a lot of times the PM is actually representing the business owner a lot of times. So that's kind of why it goes to the PMs sometimes. So this is the standard format of an MOU, and we talked about earlier. The purpose, you see it at the top: establish cooperative relationship between agency A and B. What you're following, Could be NIST, CIS, SMMC, but what's the purposes? Kind of why we're doing it. The scope, interconnection support describes transmission of compliance of audit data between AWS Glue and the state report. So, um, whatever that will be for your particular company or agency or division. Roles and responsibilities, define data ownership and custodianship, designate a system owner and designate an ISO, information system security officer, ensure the ISA and SSPs are maintained. We talked about the extra documentation. From a security perspective, what compliances are we going with? Once again, FISMA, FedRAMP, NIST 800-53. Sometimes they want you to drill down specific. We look up that and above. What security families are you drilling down specifically to? Governance and review. The parties will review the MOU and associated ISA annually upon significant change. So usually we would just review it annually. Duration, how long is the project going to last or be in effect? Non-binding statement. This MOU is not legally binding contract, but express mutual intent. Because a lot of times, when you say something legally, that's a whole different ball game, right? So you want to make sure, right, it's not legally binding, meaning you can't sue me if I don't do something, but mutual intent, meaning I can blame you if you do something that's not in accordance with the document. Practical use in cloud and GRC. Your AWS GRC ecosystem. You can model your MOUs. A lot of people know I do. It's a lot of IRS work. So AWS sends state and RSP data under PUC 1075. You would have an MOU or ISA. If you're using glue formation with Redshift, those are actually data engineering, data warehousing terms. So a lot of times in a big company, each agency is sending data to a corporate data warehouse. We want to be in agreement of how those agencies going to send us data, how we're going to once again do security, encryption, what file format are we using from Glue to Redshift. Are you putting it in Glue in a JSON format, flat file with a header and a footer? Are you just sending it once again to a JSON file? How are you sending that data to AWS Glue to get into your Redshift database to do reporting, right? And what reports do you want out of it? Right? So all that comes out once again, the MOU and the ISA. Partnership APIs and S3 buckets, event endpoints for external vendors. So if external vendors are sending you data, once again, what's the agreement of what's the data format? What's the agreement of the data classification? Two, once again, these are just internal things sent to AWS. What type of MOU and ISA would you be looking for? I'll drop the link if anybody want to come up. Cross accounts under, once again, control tower lake formation. Those are just AWS resources. Everybody know I'm an AWS guy. So once again, we were looking at the high level, the SSP 47 revision 1, managing the security of information exchange. Those are the ISAs we were talking about at the point. This is kind of NIST's overview of that. Not too bad for a NIST document. July 2021. A lot of those documents are 10 years old, so I at least want to kind of make sure it's kind of relevant when I start looking at those special publications. And at the top, if you looked at the headings, executive summary, number 1, if you look kind of at the middle of the document, planning the information exchange, establishing the information exchange, maintaining the exchange and associate agreements, discontinuing the information exchange. So that's kind of executive summary of what this special publication is for. And from their side, you have planning, establish, maintaining, and discontinuing. So we're just going to hit some of the high levels. So we kind of read this out in the presentation. Establish a joint planning team, define the business case, apply the NIST risk management. So I'm not going to read them out. Just jump to the maintain, communications, systems and system accounts, user account, conduct security assessment, analyze audit logs, report and respond to security incidents, maintain changes, review and update the system security plan and applicable agreements. So this is at the bottom. You see phase of information exchange management. Once again, this is us at a big company agreeing to how we're going to move data and how we're going to handle any issues that happen. I appreciate you, human impersonator. Can't stay for those showed up late, but wanted to say good morning. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining us. Just definitely check out the replay. I appreciate the support. So we kind of wrapping it up too. So let's kind of hit we had the last slide. Kind of what we're looking at on the document. It's recommended that the security plans include the following information: name of affected systems, participating organization. You can see it there. Methods of exchange, hardware inventory, software inventory. So once again, that's really part of the system security plan and the ISA, the technical part of that. Once again, when you going from big divisions, big organization, or external, what's the file format? What's the classification of data? What type of encryption are we using? Are we doing MFA? Are we doing API? Are we going to do an SOA architecture, right? And to be honest, that's really not a GRC fight, right? My job is to document it. Their job as a technical team is to agree to it, right? So I was talking to a CTO and he was looking at me. I'm like, dude, it's your technology. It's not my technology, right? So what do we want to do for our organization, right? What is our standards? Are we JSON, flat file, XML? What is our standard file format we want to represent for our federal or state governments, for our company or division? That's not a GRC call. But hopefully we have some standards in there, or what I tell them is we need to get some standards. Because if we're going to work with other organizations, we should have a standard that we're flat file, XMLs. Most people do JSON now. I'm not a huge JSON fan. But whatever the file format is, because when it comes in, all the developers know what it is. They know how to handle it. Hopefully we have some standard APIs we can call that'll just pull that data in and put it where we need to do, secure it and calculate it, right? So we really need to be doing a standard pipeline. But once again, that's not a GRC decision, right? So I got to make sure, especially as I get older, I'm not taking over people's projects. Now, when I was younger, man, I would want all that smoke. I'm too old for that now. And like, this is what we need to do from a GRC. Here's your security requirements, right? So here's your security for your infrastructure. Or if you're in AWS and you're doing a gateway to an API call to a Lambda, your Lambda's using Python or Java. So what's your standards? So these are the checks to make sure we're compliant, right? But it's your technology stack, not mine. It's not the GRC's team. So once again, from a communication standpoint, what is that? Here, let's go to the top. Once again, I dropped the link if anybody wants to come up, right? So these are usually in a big company or I work on big projects. These are big divisions of big companies. So even though it's the same company, divisions, they have their own, sometimes they have their own whole computer staff, right? So they have their development team, their infrastructure team is part of that division. Now, if you work for a mid-sized or centralized company, maybe this is all one team in one division. But a lot of times it's a different owner. Um, it's a different tech stack. It could be legacy. They could be running that for 15 years. Now, shout out to my man Ty. Now we spinning up something new, right? But once again, when we communicate from service to service one to service two, what's the file format? What's the security between these two technology stack? What is the technology stack? A lot of times, different divisions they have their own. We're a Microsoft team. They're a Java team, right? So how do we move data between those two different teams? Who's responsible for it? DR, disaster recovery. Are we going to be down every third Sunday at the same time to do upgrades? And so who's responsible for that? Sometimes those two teams, they don't even play nice with each other. I worked with big companies. The two teams don't even like each other. So now if we don't like each other, we definitely got to document everything because we know somebody's trying to blame somebody. So once again, what does that look like? Let's see. I think that's really all I had. I'll hang out a little longer. I wanted to do something a little shorter today on the lunch and learn. Usually I'm on for 2 hours, so I'm trying to at least get me down to an hour. So once again, I just want to hit on those two documents. Uh, Memorandum of Understanding, Interconnection Security Agreement, MOU and ISA. Those are two common documents I see inside the NIST infrastructure. And there's the two definitions I like. MOU, overall relationships, and the ISA, the technical and security requirements of your particular project. A lot of times, to be honest, especially for a small to mid-sized company, I'll push those together. I have my MOU at the front, then in my backs in the appendix, I really have my ISA documentation. Like you say there, what systems are we connecting to, right? What are those boundaries? What encryption we use, what authentication we use, and what authorization are we using between the two systems. And two is how we're going to do, how are we auditing, where we're writing our audit files. And two, incident response happens. Who do we respond to? Is there an overall PMO office for the whole project? Does my tech leadership at my division or company, who do they call upstream and downstream if we have an incident issue? All right, so we probably gonna. Oh yeah, facts. I might actually start doing videos on that time. I go to Bleeping Computers a lot, so they usually have them listed out there. So I was gonna start doing at least a weekly breaches and go over I guess two or three of the biggest one that week. It's like you say, do seem like it's a lot. I'm like, well, hell, I can at least do one a week at least. So now I'm thinking about that. So yeah, I saw him. Appreciate that though. So yeah, that's how I would handle those two documents. Once again, MOU, MOU, and ISA. Once again, overall relationships and the technical documents. And from a GRC documentation standpoint, checkbox. That's the documents we need. So when the external auditors come in, shout out to my man Larry. So from GRC and auditing side, this is what we would document as part of our SSP, right, or our system security program before we get to the SSP. And the other cool thing about that, with Larry just showing up a lot of times, these are the documents that are we will run through our PMO organization. Why do we run through our PMO organization? Right there, you see it at the top. Defines overall relationships. The PMO, your password. No, I saw that. I saw that. That is incorrect. I didn't see that. I was gonna do a video on that. That is incorrect. That's too nice for me. Yeah, shout out to that. I might do a video on that. Everybody's talking about that. I might do a video on that. Shout out to Larry. Figure I dropped the link if anybody want to come up. Larry showing up late. Nah, I'm glad he joined us. Nah, shout out to Larry. TGIF, happy Friday, everybody. But from a PMO office, I always give Larry the kudos on that. The PMO office is definitely going to handle the relationships between, like I said, I was working for this consulting company. They were doing some work for the IRS, and we were sending data between multiple IRS divisions, and each one of those divisions had a different contractor. So my PM, who I might reach out to back then, he was handling that. So I was telling him, like, we need these MOUs and ISA. And the thing they called us, I was like, if we mess up or something happens, they're gonna want to blame somebody. We need something in documentation to say what we agreed to. He really liked that. so shout out to Larry, the PMO. They handle the relationships between external companies, internal different divisions we handle with, or if we're in a large company, like I work for a Fortune 500 company. Brazil, they had their own IT division, right? That's across the planet, right? So when we send them files, what are we agreeing to? What's the security? What's the encryption? You see it there. What's the auditing? And what I like to do, and people I think enjoy this, I like to do incident response with those other teams. So say one of our developers has data on their laptop that got stolen at dinner. Who do we let know in the project that data is exfiltrated, or was it spillage, right? Is that hard drive encrypted with FIPS 140-2? Then we don't have to let the government entity know. Even though we have it encrypted at that level, do we still want to tell them, right? And like we said too, is what is our legal obligation for that reporting? If you look at some of the encryption, if you're doing proper encryption, the government believes it can't be broken, so therefore you don't have to report it. I think that BS, but what is the legal requirements that you have to report, right? So that's once again, a lot of times, Larry's in there, I'll let him chime in on that. A lot of times PMO handles that communications with the other teams because they're actually on Gantt charts and timelines for when stuff gets done, who's responsible for what, and whose development needs to be done at a certain time and point. So a lot of time PMO handles that communication, right? But I'm the communicator at the senior level of the data and of the kind of the project task, but I'm not responsible for reporting that up the chain and checking off that it's done, right? So I will report that to the PMO office that it's done, but I'm not responsible for that. So that's part of two that I don't think they really, well, they kind of had it in there. What's the communication chain of that particular data and who tells who and when what, right? So that's one thing I don't think they really talk about in there that I see that could be issues is the communication chain and who's responsible for what in there. Because a lot of times people want to be responsible for something until it don't work or until some timeline gets missed, then everybody's pointing fingers, right? So once again, part of your MOU and your ISA, you kind of flesh all that out so there's an understanding what that is. I think this is excellent from Larry. I was watching a series about working as a CISO. He said a lot of his work is being able to demonstrate the financial risk and reward implementation of a project. Oh yeah, projects friend. Oh yeah, because a lot of projects fail, and two, with the cost of IT projects, you got to figure out the risk and reward with the business owners. Because a lot of times business owners says they want to do X, and there's always usually a technical component of X. But what does that mean? Okay, your business is going to make X. If your business is going to make X, but it's going to cost 1X, 2X to for computer resources to make that happen, right? So I think people are trying to get that partnership correct. Because in the old days, it was just technology wise. But now your CISO's got to be part of the business because it's got to make business sense, like you said, financial risk and reward to implement certain data systems. Because I think in the old days, they just kind of say, okay, this is the data system, this is the tech. But I don't think, like you said, getting that financial risk and reward out there. I think that's a lot of the chief um, information security officers. A lot of times they're a lot of those guys that I saw in Fortune 500. They were actually more business than technical. Because at that level, especially I work with a company there. AWS license in a year was about $30 million, man, in the past. So you talking about 30 million, you got to be doing a lot of business for that, right? And I think, and that's interesting, right? The CISO, it used to be the CIO handled a lot of the financial risk and reward, but now with breaches and security, they want your security officer to be business savvy. Now it used to just be the CIO to be business savvy. Now they want your security officer to be business savvy because a lot of those breaches and HIPAA and GDPR, your privacy fines could be outrageous now. So they want your security officer to have a business background now. And I think that's kind of what's changed probably in the last 7 or 8 years, where they want your CISO to understand your business more. Originally, it was just the CIO. Now they want your security officer because technology now, especially at technical companies, those are very big spin items. So you got to understand what you're doing. Especially now, you talk about AI, that's a big spin. So now the security of that, the information of that, and even at the department level. No, you good. No. You never rude, Cal. I appreciate you coming, man. I appreciate the report. Never rude. Thanks for joining me. PBO know people got work and stuff going on. Just check out the replay. You can easily reach out to me if you need me. I appreciate you. Appreciate you, Cal. But once again, like Larry said, getting that business along with the tech. Like I said, it used to just be the CIO. Because in the old days, that's originally why, if you looked at the old staffing architecture, IT used to be under the CFO. Then CIO became Chief Information Officer. Then it kind of moved, right? Because that alone was a big enough bill and had its own issues where I thought they're separated. So now a lot of times, if you look at the CISO, a lot of times they're pulling the CISO out from underneath the CIO at a lot of your bigger companies. So that's its own level of the C-suite. I see that mostly at very mature companies, not mid, smaller companies. The security officers are under the CIO, but bigger, mature companies, because they feel like the CIO is going to have pressure on the security officer, and he's going to be doing things to placate the CIO, right? So they think it should be at its own level. I kind of flinch at that, but I kind of get what they're saying. But no, once again, shout out to Larry, but he's correct that your larger companies, I do see CISO The most CISOs I worked for, most of them didn't have budgets. They just said to the CFO, "We're gonna need this amount of money next year," right? But they didn't get an official budget. I've only probably seen one CISO that had a budget. Now, I'm not saying CISOs don't have budget responsibilities because a lot of security software, Splunk, Archer, those are big ticket items, right? But I don't see a lot of CISOs with budget. Now they're probably out there. I'm just saying I haven't worked with a lot of them. Once again, I'll drop the link. I'm gonna hang out a little longer. Put any of your questions. Shout out to shout out to Larry. Definitely want to make sure you change your password. I thought that was interesting when I saw that. I usually look at bleeping computers every day. Part of me getting started, seeing what's going on. So I usually hit that. So in there, like Todd said, I spent a lot of breaches and issues. So I probably start picking out going through there and pulling out some of the breaches every week. I probably start talking about that. Once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me on this happy Friday. Hopefully everybody's going well. I've just been kind of get going, trying to make a few things happen. Once again, I'm going to hang out about another 5 minutes. Drop any questions in the chat. I think my 2026 goals is going to be to get my monetization back on YouTube. YouTube did me wrong. Now, shout out to YouTube. They took a lot of creators. They didn't like how I was doing my news. I was doing news articles, and I guess I wasn't adding enough content to the news articles. I was printing, even though I see all the big YouTubers doing it, they didn't like it. So they said I can reapply. That's been 6 months ago and 3 months. So now I got to get my hours back up. You got to have 3,000 hours within a year. So it's a 12-month moving slide. So I got to get 3,000 hours within that 12-month window. I'm not far. I thought I was at like 2,500. So I need to get that going. So I appreciate everybody for joining me. I don't know. I might get with B2B and just do a 12-hour live stream. Do a 10-hour live stream. So I might do that. Oh, I appreciate it. No problems. You can always reach out to me. You getting there. Oh, do you ever? I do not casual economists. That's on my goal. A couple people asked me to speak at some. Shout out to Study GRC. I hang out with those guys. B-sides. Well, let me. There's local security groups I do in my city. I try to go to theirs once a month, but those are not conferences, right? But I do go to local events. We have a local AWS event, and we have a local security event. And I think I'm gonna start going to a local. I'm getting back into data engineering a little bit, so I'll probably start doing that. But no, I haven't attended any conferences. Especially now, I don't dislike to fly, but it's not one of my first things. I'm not scared to fly. Especially now, I don't want to fly, but I might start going to those a little bit. Shout out to B2B. He's been keynoting some of those, so I'm not gonna say I'm a keynote, but I might present at a couple. That might be on my 2026 casual economist. If a facility's holding billions in assets still cuts corners, it demonstrates how hard our job is on our level to get people. No, that is true, and I think that's where your CISOs and CIO need to communicate better with the C-suite at their level. I'm better at that, getting better at that, but sometimes I don't think the CISOs and the CIOs do a great job of communicating to the C-suite or convincing them. Now, some of those guys could be hard to invent because most people don't think it's ever going to happen to them, Larry, right? We've never been hacked. We never had any issues until you have issues, right? So I do see that, but that definitely is a challenge. Yeah, they are, which, they're $1 billion company, man. Treat them like the NFL. That's the YouTube shield they trying to protect. So it's all good. I was just making lunch money with it. So when I got demonetized, it didn't hurt me. I got invited by one of the bigger YouTubers to do a course. So I'm trying to get back on that. I just been kind of a little out of sorts in 2025, but we're going to get it back going. I appreciate Jeffrey Johnson from from joining us in this Jackson. Exactly, yeah, true. So I think, Larry, you kind of said you were working on that, and I'm definitely working on that. The communications. You have to convince people on the value, which you would think they would know, the value of cybersecurity. Then the next thing that's hard to convince, the value of GRC. Right, you got security, you got your encryption, your MFAs, your zero trust. But what's the governance? What's the GRC? Governance, risk, and compliance. So are we compliant with our federal requirements? Or if we report to HIPAA and high trust, right? HSS for hospitals. I'm an IRS guy, right? Pub 1075, CMMC for DOD, right? So those are requirements, like we talked about. Those are non-contractual bindings that you have to do for your government entity. So how are we communicating that to the C-suite, like Larry said, so they don't cut corners, so they know this is what we need to make? Because if we get hacked, that could be millions of dollars, depending on how big your company is. All right. We could get a fine. We could get $1 million fine from the government because we cut corners and didn't do what we're supposed to do. I need to dig into that, Ty. I didn't hear that. But that doesn't mean I need to dig into that, Ty. But once again, what is that communication is? And two is it's struggling. I wouldn't even consider myself at a high level. I'm at a senior level. Communicating that to managers at the management level. We're not talking to the C-suite. We ain't talking about the board of directors, right? Shareholder meetings, right? That's the top of the level, right? I'm just talking about down at the management level. We can't get business owners to buy into the level of security they need to do that data classifications of what they want to do. So how do you communicate that? Right? What's your spiel? What's your documentation? Right? And the thing I struggle with is, and I think I need to start doing video. A lot of times you got to write executive summaries of stuff like that. Like your MOU and your ISA really should be executive summaries, ran up the chain of this is what we're doing. This is who you told us to deal with. This is our responsibilities between us and the organization. And this is what our security is between us, right? If I'm a high-level manager and I'm responsible for that, I would want to see these two documents in executive summary. One page I could spin through, okay, this is what we're doing. This is who we're responsible for. This is our roles and responsibility. This is how we're doing. We got some encryption. We got some MFA. We got some zero subnet. He's a manager. He ain't gonna know all the lingo, but he wants to know we doing something, right? So this is the stuff we need to be putting in the executive summary. 9 times out of 10, he might not even read it, right? But if most times they skim stuff, right? So my job is he skims it and he feels comfortable with it, right? So you want to give him enough detail so he says, okay, I understand. Now, if he needs more detail, he needs to reach out to the people that's responsible for that. And a lot of times when I send them stuff, they have weekly or monthly meetings. They're going to bring it up in these meetings, right? This is what the executive summary said. I need some more detail on that. Right. So that's the communication. I think us as GRC, us as cybersecurity people, us as IT people need to do better with the business. So I think that's some of the things we struggle. Because I love tech, but a lot of times, like Larry said, you're not giving the business an understanding the financial risks to your cost analysis of marrying those two together, right? This is the project. These are the computer assets, resources, and how much it's going to cost. And the honest to God, truth of us, what is the risk of us failing, right? There's risk to anything we do. What is the risk of that? Oh, no, that's true. That is true. That is true. Also, as we see most time when these big orgs get hacked, the first to go is the CIO, CISO, or someone in the security chain. So communicating security with leadership can save your own job. No, that is true, and I think and that's what we're talking about. What is that communication? Does everybody understands that? As a consultant, I'm the first one to get fired, but I understand what my assignment is, right? I understand what I signed up for. So what is that? And what is that community? And two is the big part of this is if you get hacked in your big company, you will get an assessment from a third party who's going to, a la Equifax, you don't want to do something so small. I think they're interned into something, right? So then you consider negligent, right? So you want to make sure that if you get hacked, it's some nation state, some exotic attack that nobody could have blocked it, right? So that's your communication once again to make sure everybody's on point. Being able to understand what's important to them and figuring out where it connects to them. No, that is true, and part of that is your BIA, business impact analysis. And so, like Larry's saying, is at a certain level, shout out to GRC, which is us, is we need to figure out, not technology wise, but from a business function, what do they consider most important to the organization? Being able to understand the importance to them and figuring out where it connects to importance of business. So BIA, I got a couple videos of that. So part of what we do is go through as IT, governance, risk, and compliance, and says, what is your top 10 business functions you do? Everybody know I used to work for the state of Indiana tax office. Our number one goal was to collect taxes, 34 billion. That was our number one business function. So from a technology standpoint, is our number one business function is collect taxes. This Oracle database collects taxes for the number one business function, which is to collect taxes. So if the Oracle database needs to be patched or could be hacked, that's going to come up number one because it supports the number one business function in the whole organization, right? So if you were trading houses, your job would be collecting trades, picking the right stock. These are the systems that help us do that. They're ranked in this division for this business function. So what system supports these business functions? Like Larry said, that is most important to the business. It's called BIA, Business Impact Analysis. I've only seen very mature organizations do that. Do you believe commercializations of the industries cause issues? I laugh because I say yes and no. When you get commercialization of an industry, to me that means you're making more money, and that's how people get paid. If it's not commercialized, means it's more internal, meaning more it's self-funding. So you really want to commercialize industries because that's how they make money. That's how they grow. But anytime anything grows and make money, that's going to make them number one to get attacked. Right? You don't attack computer systems unless you're trying to get money out of them. Right? So that's a lot of times. So for me now, I expect them to be commercialization. We talk about capitalism, so I think that drives that. Let me know if that answers your question, Tyler. Make sure I'm thinking about it. But no, I think commercialization is part of it. When stuff get commercialized, people forget, there was MySpace, before that, they had the dial-ups. Now you got Facebook, right? You can't commercialize it anybody because Facebook really figured out to get their ad revenue from that at a whole nother level, right? So to me, that was the commercialization of ad revenue from a social media company. So they're the one that really figured out how to commercialize Facebook. Now, if you look at all the commercials and ads and stuff. I've never clicked on any of that. But obviously they're paying them because somebody's clicking on them. I've taught classes for 10 years. I've asked that question probably 400 students, 500 students. I think I only remember 2 that said they actually bought something from a Facebook ad. So I'm like, well, hell, how's Facebook making money if nobody's clicking his ad, but somebody's clicking them, right? So to me, that's the commercialization of it, right? So once Facebook started making all that money, they were opening to more attacks. But then Facebook made so much more money. They bought Instagram, and he tried to buy Snapchat for $800 million, I think, when they were in school. So that's to me, that's the commercialization of social media that everybody's trying to do the next Facebook, right? Snapchat, Instagram, right? And to me, Snapchat, I was like, dude, it's cats, man, or YouTube videos. I'm like, nobody's gonna buy that. I was wrong, right? The commercialization and how you envision it happening. Some of it I don't like, but hey, I'm old and they're gonna make it happen. But no, the commercialization that's how everybody gets paid. Once again, drop a few more questions and I'm about to get out of here. Getting an hour in. Like I said, just trying to come on YouTube, being more consistent. Giving y'all some different levels of NIST. I think I got more videos on NIST than this. So, no, shout out to NIST. So I've been doing this forever. Once again, we're talking about MOUs and ISAs, Interconnection Security Agreements. Most times when I hit the doing a large contractor, we're doing some large systems. This is definitely some of the things I always see missing. The MOUs and the ISA, especially from the new companies, smaller companies, they're not drilling down to that documentation level. Then once again, if I'm on board, we're usually reporting to some kind of federal oversight committee. Usually for me, it's the IRS, HIPAA and High Trust, DOD for CMC. So once again, there's a myriad of federal work out there. I usually love being in that space. It's usually kind of resistant to recessions, but I'm just going to say at a high level, I don't want to touch it. In this particular go around, that is not true. So I'm just going to leave that alone. So yeah, but once again, just touching on everybody know I'm a NIST 800-53 guy. That's my particular bailiwick. Let's see, I need to get a few things done today. I'm struggling. That's the link if anybody want to come up. Once again, drop a few more questions. We're going to shut it on down for today. I'm hoping everybody have a nice week, but you see it right there. MOUs, the overall relationship and intent and responsibility of organizations that covers administrative and operational management aspects. Then the ISA, Interconnection System Agreement, defines the technical and security requirements for connecting systems, encryption, authentication, data handling, audit, incident response. I would add to that authorization and disaster recovery. Those are the ones I usually add to it. Working on real life projects, working with real life people. Once again, a lot of times you got to get a package together for people can come and audit it. So these two are definitely part of your package. Pivoting to NIST, for me, just getting comfortable with the security program of NIST. Then if you go to Indeed or Glassdoor or LinkedIn, if you put NIST in there, it shows you your jobs out there, your job responsibility. Become fluent in these security families. You see them right there. It's a lot, but part of what you're going to be doing for NIST is the policies and procedures of these security families. Plans, you have configuration management plan, COOP plan, incident response plan. Then you saw the documents we were looking together. So just understanding the security program of running a NIST project. I usually split that in two. You have the management piece and the technical piece. We saw the management piece of this discussion was the MOUs, and the technical piece would be the ISAs. So the technical piece is hardening of your infrastructure, hardening of your cloud infrastructure, hardening of your database. Then you have to scan it and get findings and findings, talking about POEMs, that whole, once again, security program or running a NIST compliant program. So once again, since it's a federal program, you're going to get audited on that. So when your auditors come in, once again, policies and procedures, SSP, configuration management plan. I usually run a lot of incident response plans. I've done that in class. Running DR task plans, meaning we shut down our main database and see if it rolls over to our DR spot. So hopefully you won't let AWS was down, a couple weeks ago, to make sure if AWS goes down. But once again, that's part of a NIST security program. So just get comfortable with the bits and pieces of that program and how it works. So I think that's how you would pivot. And two, whatever your background is, part of that you probably doing piece of NIST. So if you're a DBA, part of that piece will be the hardening of the database. If you're on a technical side, if you're a network guy, you got to do your routers, your Cisco routers, or your different vendors. Being comfortable with that, right? So all that's part of NIST. And your security families, they cover everything from help desk to encryption to MFA to shredding. There's a physical component of it. Risk assessment, you see your supply chain risk and your RA. So when software vendors are coming to sell you stuff and you integrate them to your org, doing risk assessments over there. So there's a lot of touch points to get into this. I think the gatekeepers are kind of blocking people from getting to this. They want you to have things like CISSP, and we talked about that. So they want you to have 5 years of experience. So, but there's a lot of ways to pivot. I just think we just got to make sure when you pivot, you're comfortable with the things inside this. Once again, policies, procedures. We just talked about the MOUs and ISA documentation. NIST from a FISMA perspective and federal compliance perspective, it's a lot of paperwork, right? Anytime you're dealing with the government, me and Larry talked about that. They want a lot of paperwork, right? So just getting comfortable with the program, the paperwork, and like I think Larry about that, the communication with the upper management and the management from other divisions and things that you're bringing in your organization that we talked about. So let me know if that makes sense, Ty. I can start rambling a little bit in, but just being comfortable once again with the security programs and the program and the process of doing this. Drop your questions in there. We about to wrap it on up. I think PBO gonna lay down for a second. Ooh, tired. What's going on? Appreciate everybody for joining me. I think I'm about to call up. You know how to get in contact with me. Need to do a better job. I just been kind of winding down, building back up. Just kind of been burnt out a little bit in 2025. Trying to really get ready for 2026 is here. Job market seems to be a little rough. I appreciate that. Been a little rough out here. I'm out of here. If you reach out to me, professionalblackops@gmail.com. Usually people put comments on my video. I usually see those. A lot of times before I see my email, PBO got to do a better job of reading these emails. I appreciate everybody for joining me. Have a happy Friday, and I'm